with us. Any visitors we have, I'd like to invite you to come back anytime you have a chance. We'll meet again Sunday morning at 9 a.m. We have worship at 9:50, and then evening services at 5 o'clock. There is a complete prayer list in the bulletin. If you know anyone that needs to be on the prayer list, a couple of ways you can do that. You can put the person's name on the prayer list in the foyer, or you can tell one of the elders, or Jane or Matt. If you need an email sent out for a loved one or an event, please tell Matt or an elder, and we'll take care of that for you. To all the men of the congregation, if you're scheduled to take part in worship, or the elders have asked that you be here at least 10 minutes before service and let Dwayne know you're here. This will help ensure we have everyone ready when we begin, and the elders want to thank you for your willingness to serve. There is a nursery for anyone that needs it in the door back here to the right by the sound booth. Those we know of that are needing prayer: Tommy Lee Shearer, Carolyn Spivey, Blue McDonald, Tommy Mullins, Annette Wright, Kathy's aunt, Patsy Turner, who lives in Murfreesboro. She had a stroke, and she's in the hospital over there, so remember her. And pray for Charlie and Faye Brewer, both are in the Gallatin Hospital. And we're glad to see Teresa Ragland back with us tonight. So let's remember all of our sick in any way that we can. All the adult classes will remain upstairs tonight. We have a guest speaker, John Kachelman, is here, and he'll be speaking to us to the adult class upstairs tonight. Scott Wilhite placed membership last Sunday, so please be sure to welcome him to our Fountainhead family. And also remember Jack Men's House was baptized last week, and when you see him, make sure you encourage him. We are having a card shower for 3 families. There'll be a basket in the foyer for those families. Josh and Emily Draper, they just had a little girl. Her name is Ridley Ruth. Scott and Sloan Steinbrecker and Tyler and Beth Hams are both having girls. Just remember, tomorrow night, July the 7th at TNT, the youth will meet here at 5:30 at the church building. Remember our gospel meeting, July 10th through the 13th at 7 p.m. Please make plans to attend. Corey Spivey will be bringing us lessons on just a closer walk. Remember, after our morning service, we'll have a congregational meal, and then we have the zone meals Monday through Wednesday at 5:30. Please remember to make sure to bring enough for your family plus one more, so make sure we have plenty of food. Pinch item this week is canned meats. There is a sign-up sheet in the foyer for Bible Bowl, and Derek needs to know anyone that wants to participate no later than July 17th. Remember, every Tuesday is a Lady Bible Study here at the building. That's at 10:30 a.m., and they're studying the book of Romans. We have surpassed our goal of the backpack giveaway for July the 16th, so appreciate everyone with their contributions for that. July the 20th, we'll start our summer series, so make sure you plan to be here for those lessons. July the 22nd at 8 p.m. will be a lockout at the Yance home. This is for 5th grade through 12th grade. Boys bring drinks and girls bring desserts, and everyone brings snacks to have throughout the night. Bring a tent if you have one, and bring a friend. Pickup is at 7 o'clock a.m. on Saturday morning, so make sure you remember that time, 7 o'clock a.m. If you have any questions, see Derek. We will have another TNT on July the 14th next Thursday, and then July the 30th will be the last one. That actually will be on a Saturday. Back to school bash will be at the Crowder's home, so let's remember those two. After classes tonight, we need some help setting up tables downstairs, tables and chairs for Sunday's lunch. So please meet downstairs after class to help set up. That's all the announcements I have. Is there anything else that needs to be announced tonight? Okay, Ben Triplett will be leading our singing, and Will Brewer will have our prayer.
I'd like to go ahead and mark the invitation song. It will be 602. 602. For the lesson, we'll sing 281. 281. I
you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn those to Galatians chapter 6. Galatians chapter 6, we're going to look at verses 6 through 10. Galatians chapter 6, verses 6 through 10. While you're turning there, I do want to use this as another opportunity to encourage each and every one of you to come out tomorrow night to our TNT. It's dead period, I think, still. So we don't have any ball going on tomorrow. So if you don't have anything else going on, try to be here tomorrow night. We've got a good speaker. Mark Triplett's going to be speaking for us tomorrow night. And we've got a good activity planned for everybody. So if you're not doing anything, please try to make plans to be here with us tomorrow night. Okay, Galatians 6, starting in verse 6. It says, "Let him who is taught the word share in all good things with him who teaches. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption. But he who sows to the Spirit, of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are in the household of faith." If you ever pay any attention to the headings of certain scriptures in the Bible, I like this one. This one, the heading, at least in mine, says, "Be generous and do good." And I like that. That's very simple. It's very easy for us all to understand. And it's really something that we should all do as Christians, right? Each and every one of us should be generous and do good. So tonight, I just want to look at three quick things that I think that we can draw from this scripture. In verse 7, if you look at verse 7, it says, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." Number one, we are going to reap exactly what we sow, okay? If we are not good, the opposite of good is bad. And if we are bad while we are here on this earth, that is exactly what we are going to reap when Judgment Day comes, right? If we are not doing the things that we are supposed to do while on this earth, it is not going to be good for us. But this tells us if we do good, right, and we do the things that we're supposed to, then our reward is going to be everlasting life. So no matter what the reward here on earth is, the most important thing is that if we do good and we follow God's commandments, then we are going to have everlasting life. Number two, as Christians, we cannot get tired of doing good. Sometimes it's hard to be the person who does good all the time, right? Sometimes it is not easy to be the nice guy. Sometimes we just want to not treat people the way they should be treated, right? Because that's how sometimes people treat us. It's not easy. In verse 9, it says, "And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart." So just a bit of encouragement, don't lose heart. Always be the person who is trying to do good. I know it sounds real simple, but in life, if we can figure out how to be a good person every single day and follow the directions of the Bible, the commandments that are written in it, then our life is going to be pretty good. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to come without trials and tribulations. Those things are going to happen. Okay? That's why it says don't lose heart. Keep up the good work. Continue to do good. And number three, we must treat people well and do good to all people. Look at verse 10. It says, "Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith." It does mention those are of the household of faith here, but it also says do good to all. And I don't know about you guys, but the word all means all. It doesn't mean just everyone sitting in here. It doesn't mean the people who we're friends with that are in the world. It means the person who doesn't treat you so nicely at school, okay? It means the person who you don't really get along with at work. As Christians, we are to be good to all people. So just a little word of encouragement for us tonight. You're going to reap what you sow. So try to sow good, right? Number two, we cannot get tired of being the good guy. That's our job. That's our responsibility. Be the good guy. Number three, treat people well and treat them good, no matter who they are. Tonight, if there's anything that you need, whether you need to put Christ on in baptism or you need the prayers of the church, we'd be happy to help you in any way that we can, and you can do that by coming forward now as together we stand and sing.
Dear Lord, we thank you for this day you've given us, and thank you for letting us be able to come here tonight and study your word and learn some more about you. And if you would let us be able to take the devo we just heard and let us take it throughout our lives this week. And thank you for Derek and his ability and willingness to do this. And also thank you for Doug and Matt and the work that they do here in the church. And if you'll be the speaker of the hour and let him have a ready recollection of the lesson he's prepared, and let us be able to get much from it, Lord. And be with all those that we have many here sick, and especially be with Tommy Leisure and as he went through his surgery, and let him be able to heal up quickly and well, Lord. And we ask all these things through your Son's name. Amen.
It's good to be back with you, brethren. It's been a while. I was trying to think when it was. You know, COVID's kind of erased our whole memories as to how long things were. But I want to start by thanking this congregation for your continued financial support, your encouragement. You have been involved in the work that we're about to see for a number of years. You have participated in putting together personal hygiene bags previously, and they were kind of relayed down to us, and they were put into a shipping container, and they were shipped overseas to the orphanages in Ukraine. And then tonight I'm to pick up some more that's been collected. Tim and I have been communicating about this for a number of months, and we just couldn't make connections, but Providence seemed to be putting it off because now we're in need of these even more. So I will get these back to Montgomery, and we have a container that's going to be loading, I hope, next week that will go over. What you're about to see is a summary of what I have been involved in the last few months. 24 February, Russia invaded Ukraine. Actually, they had already invaded in 2014, and they had maintained occupation in some of the eastern oblasts since that time. But in February, they started a full-scale attack from all sides of Ukraine. And there's no reason, no explanation for it. Different ones will ask me, and I'll say, well, it's just pure evil, and that's all it is. And as you begin looking at the situations involved, you have to just shake your head in unbelief that such evil is being done in our modern civilization. I was over there in May, and I talked with a number of folks in Ukraine at that point, and they all expressed to me that same incredulity about why is this going on. They said, we just don't understand it. One mother told me, she said, we as mothers pray for our sons who are on the front lines that they do not have to kill any of the Russians. But she says, on the other side, the Russian mothers are praying that their sons will kill every Ukrainian there is. She says, how can you explain that? What is going on? And I told her, I said, we just can't explain some things. There is evil in the world. God often gets blamed for the evil in the world. People will say some tragedy is the will of God. It's not. God does not will bad things. He does not operate in that way, and so it aggravates me at times whenever people attempt to blame God for what evil is doing. Now, God will take evil, and Habakkuk is a book of the Old Testament that you may have not read in a long time, but Habakkuk chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, there the prophet begins his protest. And this isn't a man that didn't believe in God. He believed in God. His problem was he had a strong belief in God. And he believed that God was so great, but then he saw the situation in the world and he says, God, how do I reconcile your holiness with this evil that's going on? And you look at those verses and he says, I cry out, but it's as though I'm not being heard. He says, you make me to see wickedness. He says, justice is not rendered in this world. In fact, justice comes out perverted. The first 5 verses of the prophet Habakkuk sound so familiar to our current situation. And so let me encourage you to read Habakkuk. Not right now, do it later as you get home, but at the end, Habakkuk comes to that wonderful conclusion at the end of chapter 3. That's one of the greatest statements of faith. And basically Habakkuk says, if the economy goes down, if I lose everything, if the agricultural products do not produce, he said, I am going to exalt in God. I'm going to trust God. And that's where we ought to be. And that's where we encourage our Ukrainian brethren to be, and we hope that we are encouraging others in Ukraine to look at that faith, to trust God. You can't explain everything, but you can always trust in God and know that God is doing something. In fact, Habakkuk 1 and verse 5, in response to the prophet, God said, I am doing something. And so many times when calamities strike, it may seem God's not doing anything, but God is doing something. And he told the prophet, what I am doing, you would not believe even if it were told you what I was doing. Well, we look at national crisis and calamities, and oftentimes we think God's abandoned us, God's just turned his back on us. Remember Habakkuk 1:5, I am doing something. And he says you'll be amazed at the result of it. And that's the situation that we're going to see in this as well. On a number of the buckets you're going to see, the 5-gallon family buckets, we put this label, and this label is in Ukrainian. The bottom part of it in the red, it says Churches of Christ, and above it, it says the family where everyone is loved. Now, we are given these buckets, as we heard expressed, to all men, but especially those of the household of faith. The Lord's church is largely unknown, and so through this message, at least, they're going to get the name of the church that is helping them, the Lord's church. And then we've had some brochures that were translated into Ukrainian that we're going to be able to supply as well. But everything that we can will have this label put on it, and as you see buckets, you'll see this taking place. In March, whenever I got over there, this was one of the first photographs that was sent to me. This was a father and a mother, and they were leaving their 2-year-old baby with their relatives because they were being called to the front during the Russian invasion. I don't know what's happened to them. I don't know what's happened to this little baby at that time, but that seized me in a way that is very touching, and I think it communicates to you the situation that they were facing at that time. And this was in the early days of March. Others, like this gentleman, were being evacuated. He came from the city of Kharkiv. Kharkiv is very close to the Russian border. He is an invalid. He is confined to this wheelchair. He came at the end of evacuation of Kharkiv. At this particular place where he was, it was right across the border, Polish border, and at certain points there were 300 people that were being housed in this, and this basically is the entire room. You can think of 300 people that would be housed overnight here. They would leave, they would come. It'd take them about 4 days to get to the Polish border, and then they'd cross the border, and then they would go from place to place. And they would go to a place, they'd rest for a couple of days, then they'd go to another place. Many times I'd go to a border crossing and there'd be great big buses, and you'd see long lines of people lined up as they were getting on those buses going to the next stop. One mama looked at me and she said, "My children ask where we're going." And she said, "I can't tell them." And she was crying. She said, "I don't know where I'm going either." But this was one of the places that these refugees would go to. It was right across the border. Now, many of the items that we are shipping in the hygiene bags, they're put out if the bags aren't available or there's some extras. We put these out on shelves and people can get those as they need them. Here is a refugee center that was right across the border. And this was typical of what I saw in February and also in May. You have women, but you do not have men because Ukraine did not allow any males from 18 to 60 to cross the border. So most of the refugees and many of those that were displaced within Ukraine are what we would call single-parent family, not because the men couldn't cross with them. And here you have this mama with 4 children, and they are at a refugee center, and they had cooks that were out there cooking for them. They were provided this free. Now, the mask on here is for a reason. You'll see a number of the soldiers whose faces are blurred or they're masked over. And the reason why is because Russia is using the facial recognition software, and they will run that and they will identify the person, and then they'll start searching in Russia or in the occupied territories for relatives of these people, and they will use that to manipulate them to turn in information on the Ukraine government. So that was the situation here. This was the first airlift that we did. I took 4 pallets over to the international airport, Hartsfield International in Atlanta, and this was emergency triage equipment that we sent to the hospital in Lviv. And here are some photos of distributions. Here were some of the first responders, ambulance drivers that we had. Here's a man that he actually came from Switzerland. We have been able to develop a network that has helped us not only pull from within the U.S., but we've had help from Canada, we've had help from Great Britain, we've had help from Germany, from Switzerland, from Sweden, and this man right here happened to drive this van load of shoes from Switzerland, and they went into Kyiv. Here's more distribution at a hospital that they have. You may think that that's a small amount, and it is, but it was more than they had received. Ukraine was dependent upon Russia for their medicines and for their medical supplies. So whenever Russia invaded, they cut off all of that. And we started shipping those commodities over, and I've got photos, a few moments about a large shipment that we went. But just a roll of gauze was so valuable to them that whenever the nurses saw that, they broke into tears because they didn't have it. Here's another truck that was loading up. This was in Poland, and this fellow's name is Peter. He is in Poland driving. Now, we were given 325 pallets of pharmaceuticals in Louisville, Kentucky. And this is just one part of that. We were able to airlift 325 pallets into Poland and then truck that into Lviv, Ukraine, where they were divided, and then they were trucked to a number of different locations. This one happened to be in the city of Vinnytsia, and this location received, I forget how many pallets, but you can see behind this lady how large a shipment they received. That helped over 90 hospitals in that area. And you can see on some of those, they have our stickers there. They put this on some of the packaging that was available. We were given more pharmaceuticals, this time 150 pallets up in New Jersey, and they were sorted. They were flown free over to Poland, and then they were delivered by a Ukrainian delivery service called Nova Posta. They were delivered free. So we were able to help, 150 hospitals like that with a direct shipment of those things. The next few photographs are of bomb shelters, and this is in the city near Kyiv at the early part of the war. In this bomb shelter, and actually it wasn't really a bomb shelter, it was the basement of a building, but 200 children were kept there for 2 months, and they couldn't go out because the Russian fire would have killed them. So these children, and there were some adults there that was with them, but they were underground for 2 whole months. And at some point, they were desperate for food. They were very hungry, and we were able to get some food into them. And the way that we do that, we have groups that are called, or certain individuals, they're volunteers, they call themselves runners. And so they'll meet up at some of our distribution points, and they'll load up their cars, and then they'll take their cars into these locations. It's a very dangerous thing that they're doing, and some have been killed because of that. But because of people like that, we were able to help these children, and later on you'll see some elderly as well. Here in that bomb shelter are some of the elderly. Here is the preacher in Ivano-Frankivsk. In the middle, his name is Ivan Skaliba. We ship them over in cargo containers, and as the containers reach Poland, they have to be unloaded because the shippers are not allowing in containers to go into Ukraine because the Russians are targeting them and will destroy them. And so the shippers don't want to lose their containers. And so what happens, we have the unloading there into large trucks, and then they start going into smaller vehicles, and you'll see that as we go through some of these photos. But here is the church location in Ivano-Frankivsk, Ukraine. And there you have a van. They're in the process of loading it up with medical supplies and food and other things that are going to be going. This man is in the city of Nikolaev. Nikolaev is down south toward the Odessa, and they were in constant bombardment. I've got another photo there that we'll see in just a moment. These are some of the family buckets that we have shipped. These buckets were donated. They're not 5-gallon buckets. They were manufactured to hold, I think, laundry detergent. So they were larger than a 5-gallon bucket. But we packed those in Montgomery. We shipped them out. And not only we have packed buckets, but we have had bucket packing groups all over. And in Columbia, my daughter and her 2 children are with us, and they were a part of the Graymere and Southgate work down there, and they sent 3 container full out for Ukraine. And they had a number of buckets. They packed 1,000 buckets in one night. And that is a phenomenal feat. Here are some of the buckets that were distributed. These are children that were getting the buckets, and they were helping load these buckets into the vehicles that would be taken to the refugee centers. Now, here are some of the bucket packing. This is in Columbia, and you'll see the individuals that are involved in that. You can see how we stack them in the container. The container, a full container would hold 2,242 buckets. We have shipped several full containers of buckets. But on these, we loaded some, and then they loaded some other things as well. And on the right-hand side there, you can see Allie and Tucker as they were out loading that, the bucket there, the trucks on that day. There they are, a little bit closer photo. Here you see as the container is being loaded again, the buckets are there. And there's the end of it where they have put 2-bys up to keep kind of a load lock that went on. And then the final thing, it is sealed and it is shipped, taken probably by rail or by truck to one of the port cities here, loaded on a cargo ship, and then it is shipped. It's on the water, and then it lands in Poland, and we take it from Poland, and then we unpack it. And here you see the final result of one of the containers that we did in Columbia. They are offloading this in Poland, and then it is going to be taken into Ukraine, and there's 2 children that they are sitting in front of a van that were taking things, and they are part of the buckets that we're sending over. But we also are helping with other things. We have buckets, but then we also use funds because there's some things that they need, some food that is needed. And here you see those 3 ladies, they came to the church assembly in Ivano-Frankivsk, and they received buckets. They also received a bag of food, and some of them there, as you see, they've got Bibles in their hands. The gentleman there on the right-hand side, he was at one of the storage facilities, and again, he comes and he gets buckets, he gets diapers for his baby, and the bag is full of food and clothing. Here are some of the other things, other distribution. The one on the left-hand side is in the Carpathian Mountains. Many of the people that are coming from the east, they are being relocated in the Carpathian Mountains. There's just not much lodging available for these folks. They have not had school in session because all the schools are taken up with those that are displaced. On the right-hand side is a little girl that, as you can see, she's got some of the hygiene bags in front of her, and some of the hygiene bags have personal notes that were written. They can't read English, but they can understand the heart, and we'll see that in just a little bit. But you also see that some had put together some blankets that were given to the children as well. Here are some more distributions. There you have children that some congregations put together backpacks for the children, and they had in that backpack some things that children needed. And there you have some mothers that had come for the things. Here are some more of the blankets that had been sent over, and the 3 youngsters there, and this is in the mountains, and they, within 3 weeks, probably 3 weeks ago, they had snow. So far different from what we're enjoying here, but that was a rarity. They are now in the summertime, as you can see from the lady in the next photo, but they're even in the mountains. They get very cold at night, so those things really did help them. Here's a family that is in Ivano-Frankivsk, and they received a number of things from the distribution that had been sent over. Again, here's more families from Ivano-Frankivsk, and again, you see the labels on the buckets. The lady that is bending over writing, she is keeping a record. Whenever somebody comes to get this, then we get their name, we get their address, they have an ID number that we write down, not that we're going to do anything with it, but that just keeps it, keeps it honest. And so we know that the things are going to the people where they need to go. That is not always the case with humanitarian aid that is shipped over, relief aid. Unfortunately, some of it is winds up on the black market and is sold. Here's a photo that I received just last week, and I thought that was something else. There you had, there's a story behind this. This family lived in Lugansk Oblast. Now, Lugansk Oblast is right next to the Russian border on the eastern side. And so in 2014, when Russia first invaded, this family moved to Odessa. And the daddy was involved in shipping. He was on one of their cargo ships. And so as a mariner, he was out to sea whenever Russia invaded. His wife and little baby were still in Odessa. He comes back, and he is now enlisted in the Ukraine Navy, but his family is there. And so they received a bucket. As you can see, there's baby formula, some maybe baby oil, I'm not real sure, and some diapers, things that the children would need. And here's a couple of more pictures of youngsters. One's not very happy right there, but these are great help to these people because they have in them commodities that they just cannot get elsewhere. And I've been told that, they said, don't stop the buckets. We need the buckets. We need the hygiene bags. So what you're doing, as we take back those hygiene bags are very, very important to them. Again, some more of the distribution photos. You have a family there, 3 youngsters, and then you have a young man that is, he spread out some of his things on the couch that he had received in it. Here's 2 families. Again, no man is there because he's probably enlisted. He's part of the armed services. This also is a shipment that came from the Columbia container, and they just kind of emptied the bucket to show what all they had in that. And then, as you see, they had some personal notes that had been written for that. Here you have, again, more distribution. You have those 2 young ladies that they were able to find a softie, a stuffed animal for them. And then you have a mother and her 2 children that they received some things. Here is a group of youngsters, and they're up in the mountains, and I know that because of the wood background. In the Carpathians, they use wood for everything, beautiful construction, and the whole house is wood, and so that's how I know this is in the Carpathians. But again, this was a bucket that was and backpacks given to children, and you can see the delight that they have on their faces. This fella, he is the commandant of the state militia school in the city of Zaporozhye. He was a colonel in the militia, and then he was elevated to commandant of the school to train. Now, they are unloading buckets, and they were able to get a whole truckload. As you see, this truckload, if you look real closely, I'm not sure how clear it is, but under that tarp, it's loaded all the way to the ceiling. And incidentally, for those of you interested, this is a grain truck that they're using. Ukraine, you know, produces tons and tons of grain. And so usually this would be out in the fields, the harvest, but now because of the war, they're using it to haul humanitarian aid. And these fellows unloading it, they are part of a group that are called Veterans of Chernobyl. And many of these individuals were the first responders to Chernobyl whenever they had the nuclear meltdown in '84. And I know them personally. We've worked with them. They have helped us in a number of situations. Here's a truck being unloaded in Ivano-Frankivsk. That's the church members as they're taking the buckets off. And you can see, you know, here's the inside of the truck that they're doing. Here is a picture of the church. Many are asking, well, how's the church doing in the midst of all of this? Well, the church in the West is doing very well. The church in the East, many of them have ceased to meet because their places have been overrun by the Russians. Some of them have been persecuted. They have been dispersed to West Ukraine and to the surrounding territories. But in Ivano-Frankivsk, this was worship on the last Sunday of March, and you can see it was a good assembly. And they are still doing the work. Here's a young man that was at that assembly, and he's got a children's Bible that was presented to him. Now, when I was there in Ivano-Frankivsk in the latter part of May, the last Sunday in May, this was in the new building, and we're in the process of building this. We've been in the process for a number of years, but they are finally getting where they can get inside the building. And so now they no longer have to rent a meeting place, but they have this. This is the entry foyer, and you can see the folks that are back there. That's the front door that they come in. And as you look at this is the group that assembled the day I was there. But that meeting place was just right back behind them there inside. They are still working, trying to complete the inside construction of this. They are hoping that they can complete it enough so that some of the displaced people can live there temporarily. They can house probably about 100 people there. They're in the process of putting in showers and toilets that they can have. Here are the two men that are preachers there. Ivan Skaliba's in the white shirt, and then Vlad Pazy is in the vest there. Vlad was in the city of Kramatorsk. That was in the east. And Kramatorsk was bombed. They're in the process of destroying it right now. Vlad, I've worked with Vlad in Kramatorsk. We've shipped a number of containers in there to the hospitals, and it really built the church up. But now the church is boarded up. Last report we had, it was still okay, not harmed, but Vlad is out in Ivano-Frankivsk. And as soon as he came, he started teaching, he started working, and as a result of that, he taught this lady who came from the east. She was unfamiliar with the church, but in the course of the communication and the work giving to the refugees, Vlad taught her, and then she was baptized into the Lord. And here's another immersion that was outside of the city of Belocerkva, and this was a man again. He was one of the displaced peoples coming, and they taught him the truth, and he obeyed the gospel. This is the church in Poland. When I was there, I spoke to two congregations in Poland. This was one in the city of Wrocław, and there's only 4 established congregations of the church in Poland. I was kind of disappointed because I thought there would be much more. There are members that are baptized that are scattered throughout the country, but only 4 established congregations. And on the Lord's Day, many of those that are scattered will make their way to these congregations where they are worshiping. This congregation in Roslav does not have what we would call a full-time preacher, but they have 2 men of the congregation that do the preaching, and you see Stefan here. He is one of those men, and his wife is sitting next to him. This young lady is named Sophia. Her husband is an evangelist in the Kyiv area. She was evacuated, came to Poland, and she lived about 2 hours away from Roslav. So every Lord's Day, she would get up, take a train 2 hours with her 2 boys, and she would be in worship, and then she'd take the train back for 2 hours. She was on the rails 4 hours so that she could be in the worshiping assembly with brethren. There was another man, he was from Nigeria, he was going to school, and he, in one of the congregations in Warsaw, they have an English-speaking worship and then a Polish-speaking worship. Well, he didn't know Polish, so he had to attend the English-speaking worship. He had to ride a train 6 hours one way. So he'd get up in the morning, early in the morning, he'd ride that train 6 hours, and he would come in, and he was grinning, and he was happy to be in the assembly, and he would worship with his brethren, and then back on the train, 6 hours, 12 hours going to worship. Can you imagine that? That shows you, brethren, the devotion that our brethren have. And as I said, that's not necessarily Ukraine. You know, that brother is from Nigeria, but they just love being together in the worshiping assemblies because it encourages them and builds them up. And I was talking to Tim before, you know, the fellowship that goes on in the congregation before, a wonderful noise level in that because you enjoy that just as they do. And they miss that when they're not there, and so do you. I think, if anything, COVID taught us just how much we miss that. This was a little girl in Roslav. She is a daughter of one of the members of the congregation there, and we happened to have a birthday celebration that day, and she's enjoying some cake from that. Down in Odessa, we shipped food and other supplies into an elderly home. Many of those that evacuated Odessa, and Odessa is right on the Black Sea, and they've been shelled relentlessly by the Russians. And so many evacuated. Well, there are some that cannot evacuate. They're bedfast. And so they were left. And not because they wanted to be left and not because the children didn't want to take them, but they just couldn't move. And so we have this elderly home there that the people they couldn't go anywhere. And so they were needing some food, and we helped them to get food. We happened to ship over, many of them were on feeding tubes, and so we happened to ship over some baby food in jars, and that supplied the nourishment that many of these needed. Some of the photos, I saw some items that we'd shipped in before. And then in the villages, here's a photo from a village near the border of Ukraine and Moldova. And again, the lady just cannot get out of bed. She can't leave, but look at the appreciation and the gratitude she has just for that small sack of food that was given in the name of the Lord. Let me go back to the evacuation. As folks would leave Ukraine, they would go to the border. They would wait. Many times they'd wait 4 days at the border before they could be processed because of the great crowd that was there. And then as they would go through, they'd be processed, and then they would go to a point where they would be assigned places. Many of these were like this that you see right here. There'd be schools, there'd be gymnasiums that they were in, and they would be here for 3 to 4 days until a bus could come and get them and take them on to the next location. And you look at the accommodations, you know, there were no conveniences for them. We're talking, you know, very primitive situations. And if you're like me, you can remember gymnasiums where we had floors painted almost like that. And that's the way it is right there. And they were spread out, as you can see them. Some in Warsaw like this, they were housed in coliseums. One that I visited on the border, it was in a large sports arena. They didn't have the stadium seats as you see here, but they had the old bleachers, and they even had beds spread out on the bleachers where people would sit. But there, behind them, you see a curtain, and behind that curtain there were that many more. In this, there's no privacy, there's nothing at all. You're just out there, and there's no security. That's what you have. That's the trauma that these people are going through, and you can imagine, you know, here you've got, you know, women with small children that are doing that. Here are some more photos of distribution. These are some military that helped us get things in the hot spot. One of the fellows I'm working with is a colonel in the military, and I've worked with him so that we can get secure transport and guards for the things. And he told me, he says, I'm going to put your name up. I said, no, put the church's name up. And I don't know, if any of you have ever dealt with colonels, you know, you just can't really tell a colonel very much. And so you see the benefit here. At least he got the church's name before mine, but they were very appreciative. And he said, I want to do it just to tell people how thankful we are. And here I am in Lviv, standing at one of the warehouses. Fellow next to me is one of the high-ranking officials that has helped us tremendously. The colonel came down to Montgomery, and there we presented him with the Alabama flag, state flag, and you see that there on the side. But he hung that up so that I would feel welcomed as I came in. Here are baby formulas that we shipped over. In fact, these were airlifted, and then the military took them in to different places. Here is another distribution center. This was in the city of Warsaw to those that were refugees. And the white boxes there are baby aspirins. We were given 6 pallets of baby aspirin. Next to him, his hand is on a Lowe's box, so you know that's one of ours. It had baby formula in it. Here is a young lady that's getting, looks like crocheted toys that some folks had knitted to send to her. Here's more baby formula. You can't really see it, but that the tag there says that it was going into Odessa. Here's a soldier that he was taking baby aspirin to distribute to. We took one of those slides earlier was the Special Needs Children's Hospital outside of Kyiv, and so we were able to give them baby formula and medications. Here's a photo from Nikolaev again, showing, you know, the great desire that these people have for the things. They were just reaching out, and I thought that was very, you know, picturesque of the situation. Here is a photo. Every time I'd go to a border crossing, I'd find a wall of photos like this. Some of the border crossings had 15,000 people a day coming across. And remember, most of these are mamas with multiple children, no dads around, and you can imagine the milling mass and how children are going to get separated. And there were walls, just thousands of pictures of children like this. In Ivano-Frankivsk, we work with the children's shelter. This is for children that have been taken away from parents because of criminal activities, because of abuse, because of neglect, because of drugs, whatever, you know, makes them unfit to be a parent. And so we have helped this children's shelter for a number of years. We actually helped to remodel the kitchen for them. Here are some photos where they are unloading supplies for us. And if you look, you'll see very few smiles on these children's faces. They just don't smile. They don't have much to smile about in life. Life has not treated them very well, at least the older ones. Now, some of the younger ones, like we've seen before, they can still give you a smile, but you get the whole group together, and the older children that have been in the system for a long time is pretty sad. Here are two young men that they will show you basically the meal they get. There's broth and hot tea. Here are photos from distributions that we did. The young boy there at the bottom, he was locked in a cellar by his father. He was beaten. They found him curled up in a fetal position, and that's the way he stayed for a while. And so we had some ladies that made some teddy bears, and they were presented to these, and you can see the two brothers there. The older brother is helping the baby brother up. Here are photos from distribution in the villages. This is in the springtime, so it's still wet. Here are some photos that I think are great. I like that young man in the blue shirt. He's proud of the bag that he's got and so thankful for it. Here is communication. Greetings, dear brothers and sisters. Today at 9 a.m., we unloaded a container with buckets, medical supplies. Big thanks to you for your help. Currently, Church of Christ is among those that do most to help people support the army and displaced. May the Lord keep all of you safe, and may you never know what war is and never hear air raid sirens. We keep you in our prayers. Here's photos, again, Columbia. This is Lily Mae as she is helping, and this is Kinley Kate with her special message, Ukraine, we care about you. They Googled that phrase, and then they had the children write that in. One final quote. This came from Ivan Skaliba. He says, people in the village are beginning to see the difference between the Orthodox Church and the Church of Christ. And they have stopped ridiculing Bogdan and Galina and calling them a sect. Bogdan and Galina were converted, and the village ostracized them. Because they had left the Orthodox Church, but now they've stopped that. They see now that it's through the Church of Christ that the Lord helps the village and supports its inhabitants. Pietro Fedorovich, Galina's father, is a good illustration of this. Every family in Zelena knows him. Now, Peter here, let me just really quick, a story about Peter, much more. I talked to Peter before he's immersed. In fact, I helped immerse him about 3 years ago. And Peter's concern, number one, he said, I've already been baptized. And number two, he says, I've got a business that I'd have to give up. Well, number one, I said, Peter, let's look at Acts 19. There you had 12 men. They had been baptized, but they were baptized for the wrong reason. Peter says, I see that. I said, all right, let's look further at Acts 19. There you have those that were involved in sorcery and witchcraft and all kinds of ungodliness. They gave it up and burned all their books, and it cost them a great amount. And I said, what about this business? Well, remember, he's in the mountains. He says, well, I sell moonshine. And I said, okay. And he says, everybody is my friend because I sell moonshine. And if I'm baptized, he says, I've got to stop. And I said, you're right there. You're going to have to stop it. But he says, what about my friends? And I said, Peter, you do what's right, and everything's going to work out. So with that, understanding that, and that's I wish I could tell you the whole story of Peter, but we don't have time. But now, go back here. Every family in Zelena knows him. He became a different person after baptism and has a peace of mind now. He's overcome the fears he had before. Pietro Fedorovich spends more time praying and sends big thanks to the American brethren that visited the village. He always sends his greetings. Well, that's what we want, isn't it, brethren? That's why we do it. The benevolent work of the church is not a work in itself. It's a work that leads to the purpose of preaching and teaching the gospel, of opening hearts to those that otherwise would never know the Lord's church. So that is what we are doing in the presence of the evil in Ukraine. We're making an impact, the Lord's church is, and you are a part of that. And I am thankful you are a part of that, and I want to thank you for that. And I am so appreciative of the partnership that we have in the Lord's church. My time is gone, so much more can be said. Now, I do send out a newsletter. Actually, since the war, I haven't done newsletters. I've had to do updates because of the changing. Some of you are getting those, but if you are not and you would like to be added to the mail list, please print your email address and I'll be glad to do it. Or if you gave me your name before and you've changed email, then let me update your email list on that. Let's close with prayer. Will you pray with me? Our Lord God Almighty, we're thankful that in the midst of evil that we can see good being done, and we pray, Father, that we will be lights and salt and leaven in the world, so that through our works men will see you and glorify your name, and that they will become a part of your church. Thank you, Lord, for the church, and thank you for the opportunity of being able to work in the church for your glory. In